Okay, thank you so much. You already announced the title of the presentation. I just made a small change. So it's not in young Dutch learners, but young learners of Dutch. I don't know whether I swept the order, but it reads better at this moment. This is a joint work together with the colleagues and our previous master student at the VU Amsterdam. And this research is funded by NWO as well, and the grant ID is there. So I will start the presentation with a brief summary of what we have done. Now we can move on to the next slide. So you can just click, and then we have a lot of information. Okay. Yes. So what we have done is we have developed two innovative trainings to train young children's. Can we go back a little? Yeah, thank you. To train young children's phonological working memory. So we based our trainings on a lot of empirical findings so far, supporting the role of phonological working memory in language learning processes, not only for second language, also for first language, and also for language children with language kinds of disorders. And then the theoretical background is the memory model of Bedley. So it's the phonological loop. That's the idea. Now we can move on to the background. Very briefly, if you do not know very clearly what phonological working memory is, it refers to the ability to temporarily store and manipulate a speech sound information for a different purpose. So you can consider forming word representations or sentence understanding, so sentence comprehension. You can consider about discourse skills and also later on literacy development. So for all kinds of linguistics tasks or competence, you will have to make use of your phonological working memory. And then if you look at the role of phonological working memory on the one side and the other, okay, this is the theoretical model. Sorry, I don't have the slides in my hand. So I just continue. This is the memory model we used. I think most people are familiar with this model if they do something with cognitive science or whatsoever. Now, in this model, we have different components, and for us, it's very important to focus on the phonological loop. And the phonological loop, the working memory is actually the functional expression of this component within this bigger model for memory. And in the phonological loop, you have two small components, subcomponents, inner ear and inner voice. And they have different functions and they are interconnected with each other. So we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. And for the inner ear, basically, there is a short-term memory. We call it phonological store. So you hear sound speech information and you store it there in the inner ear. It's a passive activation. It's a passive use of, or like passive training or passive target of the phonological working memory. And you use that in the ear to hold speech sound information for a couple of seconds. And if you move on to inner voice, it's more active. It's a more active side of phonological working memory. It's about articulatory control process. And sometimes you use inner voice to do the mental rehearsal. So you see already the different, the division of the roles. One, the inner ear is more passive, on the inner voice is more active. Active, target on the phonological working memory. Yes. And then if we move on to the next slide, it's about the role of phonological working memory in language acquisition. Now, I mentioned already in both first and second language acquisition, you will find a lot of significant positive influence from a strong phonological working memory in different language domains, from phonology, prosody, listening skills, vocabulary development, syntax, morphosyntax, sentence comprehension, discourse skills, and later on literacy development when children learn how to read and write. So, and also for at a higher level of language, that is the discourse, maintain a discourse, stay on the topic, and those kind of things. And also maybe a little bit use of gesture and understanding prosody. You can find a lot of findings supporting the positive role of phonological working memory. And also from a different perspective, if you look at language pathology, we can move on to the next slide. So that is then children with, for instance, developmental language disorder or developmental dyslexia or some kind of reading difficulties. You will find that these children have limited or less efficient phonological working memory. And also a lot of research, cross-linguistic research on DLD has proposed that limited phonological working memory can be considered as a clinical marker for this condition. So it seems to be very evident that phonological working memory supports language acquisition, language competence from typical and atypical groups, so to say. So, and if we move on to the next slides, I think it's a very naive hypothesis. And the hypothesis is if you target in a training, for example, in an intervention study, target at phonological working memory, then we can have better language acquisition results or maybe smoother acquisition process. So this is very naive hypothesis, and then we start looking up to in the literature to see whether previous people has done something similar, and we found some results already. So we can move to the next slides. So far, different people, different colleagues have been using different kinds of methods to train phonological working memory. In the Kim et al. Study, they target bilingual toddlers, so very young kids. They use the backward span and dual load condition task, and they found significant difference between two groups, one group trained and the other not trained, and in understanding the rhyme in English and some kind of prosody, and also in word learning. And then also into a Greek study, that's the second one, the noun-word repetition task. There are two Greek studies have been using this method to target children aged from 7 to up to 12 or 14 years old. There are two different studies. One of them just targeting the native language of the kids, and the other was targeting the second language of the kids, the foreign language, that was the English as the target language. And they also found significant difference between the trained and untrained group in vocabulary development in English, and in the other study is in the reading skills of Greek. And also in another study, this is only like the memory-based gamified task. This proposed all kinds of classroom instructions which will help foreign language learners of English to understand the English prosody better, and to increase their phonological awareness and to train their phonological work memory. But there's no empirical study reported there. And then in the end, you also have some kind of method. You can target phonological working memory to train that by creating phonological awareness. So some games with rhyme and some bingo, bingo games. We all know that. I hope so. So these are the previous findings, previous trainings, and we can move on to the next slide. So our current study research is basically based on these two features. So first of all, the noun words repetition. So noun word is very important here. We talk about top-down and bottom-up processing already. We chose to focus on noun words in the repetition task because noun words avoid top-down processing. So you really have to listen to the sounds and to bottom-up processing. And then we chose the memory-based games. We use this format because our target group would be young children between 4 and 8 years old. So these are the important features for us. Now we can move on to the next slide. So our objective is to develop interactive memory-based games. We would like to design it for touchscreen use, and then through the web, in the form of a web application. Age range has been talked about, and then Dutch as the target language. So at this stage, we only have monosyllabic Dutch noun words, and the bisyllabic and trisyllabic noun words are for the future. Now we can move on to the next slide. So the game types, if you still remember, for the phonological loop, we have the inner ear and the inner voice. So inner ear is more passive and inner voice is more active. Now we would like to target both the passive and active engagement of phonological working memory. So both components should be engaged in the games. And in the end, we would like to strengthen the phonological loop as an internally connected component of the larger memory model, memory system of human being. And we had two game types. So one is the memory game and the other is the match game. And in these games, we have audio recordings of Dutch noun words and linked to the digital cards. So you can see it on the screen. Yeah, this is the design of the memory game. If you enter the interface on internet, you will see this kind of board, and you use different pairs of cards. And just as how you would play the classical memory games, you will click on the card and the card will flip over, and it turned great if you found the matching between two words. This is just an example showing you that one match has been found. And the whole game would be completed if you found all the matches. And then for this game, we have we can click on to the yeah. So the digital cards are there already, and the audio files are linked to the digital cards. Audio files will be played on click on the first click, and then we have different levels. So we have easy level and difficult level, 6 pairs of sound or 9 pairs of sound. And now the next game type is the match game. It looks like a multiple choice question if you're still making the exam question by the end of the academic year. So you have a target sound, that is the on top row, that's the left-hand one, and then you have an empty box. So the idea is the kid or like the participants will first listen to the target sound, the noun words, and the participant can random click on the bottom row on one card, and then one sound will play. If the sound is a match, you can drag the bottom sound to the little box next to the target sound on the bottom, on the top row. And then if the match has been found, and you will get some confetti. So that's the idea. And for this game, we also have 2 different levels. We have 6 options, that's the easier option. And we have 8 options at the bottom, that is the harder level. So they have to listen to more, or maybe they are lucky, just the very first one, they can find a match. So that's the idea. So if we move on to the next slide. Yes, thank you. So the idea behind these 2 games is if you want to complete the game, either one, you will have to first of all actually listen to the speech sound information and then store it for a couple of seconds or maybe longer, and then you have to listen to multiple noun words, and then you have to compare the multiple noun words, and then in the end you will decide whether the multiple noun words that you have heard there is any match, or maybe they are the same. So it's if you move on to the next slide, we will see that the first step in completing the game is the active. Oh yeah, the slides are not there. It's okay. So the active and the passive engagement of the phonological working memory are all involved in the process I described just now. So we move on to the methods. As for the materials, we have, as said, we only have monosyllabic structures. So we looked into the frequency data of Dutch syllables, and we found out that these 5 syllabic structures, actually also the vowel structure, only the V is the most frequent ones, but we removed one vowel, because it seems to be a little bit universal. We do not want to have some kind of universal feature in the game, because the target language is very clear, it's just Dutch language. So we would like to have all the noun words to be as most representative as possible for the Dutch language. So these are the syllabic structures, consonant, vowel, consonant, and so on and so on. We have also structures with consonant cluster. As for the vowels, we have 6 different vowels. These are the 6 vowels we used in the end. We also removed vowels like a and the the schwa, which cannot be considered as really representative for the Dutch language, distinguished from other languages. And onset consonants, we have a bunch of them, and coda consonants as well. And then we also have the consonant clusters. And for the clusters, I have an appendix at the very end. So if you are very interested, I can show you the slides. There are a lot of them. And so with all these materials, we hope that we could have a pool of noun words, monosyllabic noun words, which can represent the Dutch language prosody and phonological structure and features to the most. And then if we move on, thank you. Yes, this is just a citation of the data. Yes, as for the noun words creation, we just use a computer model to generate all kinds of possible noun words. So we define that this sound can appear in the onset or the coda, or which vowel in the center, which kind of syllabic structures can be there. So we have in the end a lot of words, more than 8,000. But of course, we need to rule out the existing words. So we check the whole list against the 2 existing Dutch dictionaries. These are all online. And then in the end, we had the real human, to check all the Dutch words to make sure that these are non-existing and they don't sound as existing words at all. And then in the end, we used a model to synthesize the speech from text to speech. And then we also check on the speech quality and the speech, the intelligence. The intelligence, do you say that? Yeah, yes, by human being in the end. So in the end, we have 1,729 noun words. Yes. Yes, then we can move on. Yeah, I remember the number correctly. Thank you. As for the game, this is a part of the job that my colleague Luis has done. He used Python and then is a package name. So the whole game is now can be hosted on the university server from the VU. So basically, we would like to have the game randomized for the difficulty levels, so 50-50. As for the game type, because a memory game is a big game board, it takes very long time for the participant to finish. So we only have 20% out of the 100% to be the memory game, and the other 80%, the participants will probably get the match game. That's the idea. And the selection of numbers, each time on the play is just random selection. Just on the play, you will get a new board. So the chance is very small that you will get identical words, the game board, like within how many times of repetition. The chance is really, really small. But we have a fixed template for the syllabic structure. So we would like to have all the syllabic structures appearing at least once in each game. And the visuals are also changing with each game. So different colors are used just to have more like in entertainment, to entertaining more. And as for the background information, the progression has been tracked. So how many time a player had spent on which game and how many attempts and how often a game is finished within the timeout or like recorded. And the game can be played per user ID or like per IP. Yeah, that's the idea. So we can move on to the conclusion. That's okay. I think I cannot really play. I have a link. Where are the texts actually? Maybe you just click on and we can see more texts. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Yes. I think in the end we have these kind of materials, two digital materials, two types of materials for training phonological working memory in young learners of Dutch, speakers of Dutch. So the theoretical model is very clear, based on phonological loop. And then we have support from the empirical findings and also very specific studies using noun-word repetition task as training method for phonological working memory. Now, if we move on to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. We have these two games. And in the end, we would like to target Dutch as the target language. At this moment, we are still finalizing the data for the first intervention study. So we have 54 Dutch kids, not Dutch, sorry, the young children learning Dutch as a second language here in Amsterdam. We have 10 weeks of intervention, 3 measure moments. So we would like to see in the end whether our method can help these kids learn the Dutch language quicker, sooner, and with better results. So in the future, we would like to extend the game from monosyllabic to bi and trisyllabic noun words. And then we have to consider the stress pattern when you have multiple syllables. And we also would like to extend from Dutch language to other languages, maybe to universal or quasi-universal training for phonological working memory in general. And we hope to extend the use of the method to atypical populations as well. So targeting children speaking Dutch at this stage, speaking Dutch as native language, but with a developmental language disorder, and maybe for older kids, 8 to 10 years old, and when they have diagnosed with dyslexia. Yes, and that's I think that's it. The next slides would be references. Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for your presentation. I would like to ask if there are any questions. Okay, I see Antinous has his hand up. You may.
I would like to just to ask you so many things, but I will not do this. First, I will thank you. It was very interesting. And
Thank you.
then just just to say a couple of things, how lucky you are. I mean, with technology and everything, and how things have progressed. When I attended your presentation, it came to my mind when we were working, and not in all universities around the world. I mean, a few universities here in Europe and some in America, and we have the spectrograph. Spectrogram, it was a couple of seconds to analyze in paper. But the paper was too expensive, and we would just take a shot just when we have progressed and we had meaningful questions. We couldn't go to the lab and test with this expensive paper. And it's not only the technology, it is the way of thinking. And I just would like to say that you have now the possibilities in all the places around the world. And science has been popular now, and almost anybody can do very, very important things. Thank you very much indeed for your presentation.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Antonis. I see Alika has her hand up. You may.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Really nice presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank
You will not be surprised that the part that interests me a lot about is the relationship between phonological working memory and prosody. And I was wondering, you were talking about extending your research to include more words with more syllables than just one, and also other languages. And I was thinking whether you would want to do that using languages that have quite an unpredictable stress pattern, like Dutch words do, or for instance, rather a language with a more predictable stress pattern like Spanish, which has very fixed rules for lexical stress. I was wondering what your thoughts on that would be.
Yes, I will still focus first on Dutch language. I'm not a Dutch language expert, but my Dutch knowledge is way more than my knowledge of Spanish. And also because this is the pilot study using the monosyllabic, I think it's natural step to extend it to within the same language, but with multiple syllables. Yes. Yeah, I understand what you mean by the stress pattern is some kinds of unpredictable, but there's some kind of default rules as well. So most words are having this kind of pattern and the others are not. I think it's also nice when you have different, I don't know whether it's still modern to say the weight of the syllable, and that weight also matters. So maybe we can add also the issue of the exceptions with the weight of the syllable when you have long vowel, something like that, and the beginning or the end. Yeah. Those are the things, but things becomes more complex if you have like multiple factors. So we still try to get first the funding and then work on the topic. Yes, thank you. Yeah,
Nice, good luck.
thank you. And I think you're in Latvia, so we can keep in touch and then, yeah. Thank you.
For sure.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you so much. I appreciate all the questions, and thank you once again for your presentation, Jinglin. We appreciate. We're going to move on to our online presentation. Sentomi Shino with the paper predicting willingness to communicate with goals and successful communication experiences. I have presented you with co-host ability. So yes, okay, there we are.
Okay, thank you very much for your introduction. Hello, my name is Satomi Shinohe from Hokkaido Information University, Japan. Well, this is my title of my presentation. I'd like to begin. Okay, so first, let me briefly explain the background of this study. Willingness to communicate, or WTC, is widely recognized as one of the most important factors in successful second language communication. And many previous studies have investigated double TC in EFL contexts. However, relatively little research has focused on two important factors simultaneously. The first is learners' past communication experiences, especially successful experiences. The second is learners' future goals for learning English. Although both factors are theoretically important, few empirical studies have examined how they work together to influence double TC, or willingness to communicate. This research gap motivated the present study. The purpose of this study was to identify the key predictors of double TC among Japanese EFL learners. The first is I focus on three variables, and the first is successful communication experiences, which I will refer to as success. The second is actions for goal achievement, referred to as actions. And the third is goals for learning English, referred to as goals. Using these variables, I tested a theoretical model explaining how double TC develops. And this slide shows the hypothesized model. I expected that successful communication experiences would positively influence double TC. And I also expected goals for learning English to positively influence double TC. In addition, successful experiences were expected to promote learners' action toward goal achievement. Finally, those actions were expected to contribute to stronger learning goals. Overall, all the paths were hypothesized to be positive. Based on this model, the study addressed two research questions. First, does the hypothesized model fit the data of Japanese EFL learners? And second, which specific factors serve as the key predictors of double TC in this context? Now, let me explain the methodology. The participants were 200 undergraduate students in Hokkaido, Japan. Among them, 154 were male and 46 were female. Their ages ranged from 18 to 22. And all the participants were non-English majors, and their English proficiency ranged from beginner to upper intermediate levels. And in this study, 4 questionnaires were used. Double TC was measured using the willingness to communicate in the classroom scale, developed by McIntyre and colleagues. And successful communication experiences were measured using the experiences of successful communication scale. Also, goals for learning English and actions for goal achievement were measured using scales, all developed by the author. As shown in the slide, all the scales demonstrated satisfactory reliability with Cronbach's alpha coefficients ranging from 0.85 to 0.91. To test the proposed model, structural equation modeling, or SEM, was conducted using IBM SPSS AMOS 28. Model fit was evaluated using the common indices CFI, TLI, SRMR, and RMSEA. Because the data violated the assumption of multivariate normality, a Wallenstein bootstrap procedure with 2,000 resamples were also conducted. The significant level was set at 0.05. Now let us move on to the results. The SEM analysis showed that the hypothesized model fit the data reasonably well. The fit indices were as follows. CFI was 0.938, TLI was 0.926, SRMR was 0.072, and RMSEA was 0.069. So these values indicate an acceptable to good model fit. Therefore, the proposed theoretical framework was supported. This answers the first research question positively. And because the multivariate kurtosis was 24.42, the assumption of normality was violated. So to address this issue, I conducted a Boolean bootstrap analysis with 2,003 samples. The results showed that the model fit remained stable and reliable. This suggests that the findings are robust despite the non-normal distribution of the data. Next, I examined the structural paths among the variables. All hypothesized paths were statistically significant at the 0.001 level. Therefore, every proposed relationship in the model was supported. These findings provide strong evidence for the validity of the theoretical framework. And this slide presents the final SAM model. And among all the predictors, successful communication experiences had the strongest direct effect on TTC. And goals for learning English also had a positive direct effect on TTC. In addition, successful experiences positively influenced actions for goal achievement. Those actions, in turn, positively influence learning goals. So taken together, these results suggest that learners' past experiences and future-oriented motivational processes are closely interconnected. As shown in the model, the standardized past coefficient from success to TTC was 0.051, and making it the strongest predictor in the model. And the path from goals to TTC was also significant, but its effect was smaller. This suggests that learners' past communication experiences may be even more influential than their future aspirations when predicting their willingness to communicate. So one particularly important finding concerns the role of successful communication experiences. Success showed the largest direct influence on TTC. In other words, learners who had experienced successful communication in English were more willing to communicate in the future. One possible explanation is that successful experiences increase learners' confidence and also promote positive attitudes towards using English. As a result, learners become more willing to engage in communication opportunities. So the results also suggest a possible developmental process. Successful communication experiences may encourage learners to take more positive and proactive learning actions. These actions may then help learners develop meaningful goals for learning English. Ultimately, clearer goals contribute to higher levels of TTC. Although this sequence cannot establish causality, it provides a useful framework for understanding how TTC may develop over time. One possible interpretation is that successful communication experiences may create sense of competence. This sense of competence may encourage learners to invest more effort in learning activities. Through these activities, learners may develop clearer and more realistic goals for English learning. So to summarize the discussion, both successful communication experiences and learning goals significantly influence TTC. However, successful experiences played the more dominant role. This finding supports previous research suggesting that learners' communication history strongly shapes their future willingness to communicate. At the same time, future-oriented goals remain important because they help sustain motivation and engagement in language learning. Therefore, both past experiences and future goals should be considered when promoting TTC. These findings have several pedagogical implications. Teachers help learners accumulate successful communication experiences whenever possible. They should also encourage learners to take positive learning actions and develop meaningful future goals. And practical examples include pair or group communication activities or low anxiety speaking opportunities, goal setting activities, and reflective learning tasks. Such classroom practices may help learners build confidence and strengthen their willingness to communicate. For example, rather than evaluating only grammatical accuracy, teachers may wish to create opportunities in which learners can experience successful communication. And small group discussions or information gap activities may help learners build positive communication experiences. In conclusion, the SEM analysis supported the hypothesized framework. Successful communication experiences emerged as the strongest contributor to WTC. And actions for goal achievement and learning goals also played important roles. Overall, the findings suggest that examining both learners' past experiences and future goals is essential for understanding and fostering WTC in EFL contexts. This study contributes empirical evidence regarding how psychological and behavioral factors influence learners' willingness to communicate. So these are the references of this presentation. And this is the acknowledgement. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention. I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Satomi, for your presentation. It was a very well thought presentation. Are there any questions from anyone? All right, seems like we don't have any questions, but thank you once again for your presentation. We will be moving on to our next presentation from Neriko Matsumoto on expressing contrast between come-v and go-v sequences.
Thank you for your kind attention. My name is Noriko Matsumoto. I'm with Osaka Electrocommunication University in the Center of Education, English Education. Today I'm going to examine the need for corpus-based, pragmatically informed instruction on how to express contrast between the can-be and go-be sequences, drawing on linguistic descriptions of English grammar. Because no current grammar textbooks and learners' dictionaries for advanced students and their teachers have treated such a contrast. To solve this research question, I'm going to empirically show why this contrast is essential for both learners and teachers. This is an overview. These are the points I'm going to cover today. My presentation is in 4 parts. First, I'll look at syntactic features. Next, I'll focus on main findings from our corpus analysis. In section 3, I'll explain semantic features. I'll finish with a summary and mention future directions. First, I'll show you syntactic features. Both the can-be and go-be sequences have 2 syntactic features. One is that only non-past form of the verbs come and go are acceptable, as in 1. And the second verb is always in the bare form, as in 1 and 2. The other is that, as in 3, no word can be inserted between the first verb, come or go, and the second verb. Second, I'll show you two main corpus findings from the Collins Word Banks Online. First, this figure shows frequencies of use of the Kanvi and Gobi sequences per million words in 6 genres. In the Kanvi sequence, the ephemeral subcorpus shows the highest frequency. In contrast, the informal speech subcorpus shows a much lower one. In the Gobi sequence, the high frequency is found in the books and the informal speech subcorpora. In both sequences, the newspaper subcorpus shows a very low frequency. It is fair to state that both Kanvi and Gobi sequences tend to occur in more formal or objective contexts, such as newspaper and radio broadcast. Both the Kanvi and Gobi sequence do not tend to occur in more formal or objective contexts, such as newspapers and radio broadcast. Second, this table shows the inflection categories of the first verb in the Kanvi and Gobi sequences. In the Kanvi sequence, imperative forms are predominant. However, the Gobi sequence shows no such tendencies. The predominance of imperatives in the Kanvi sequence is closely related to its higher frequency in the ephemeral subcorpus mentioned above. Third, I'll explain semantic features from a semantic standpoint. The Kanvi and Gobi sequences retain their deictic interpretations. The deictic interpretations of come and go is widely covered in student grammar books and learner dictionaries. The uses of come and go are asymmetric with respect to the goal as the deictic center in the motion use and the normal state in the non-motion use. As in 4a, come is used only when the mover moves towards the goal as the deictic center. As in 4b, go is used only when the speaker is not at the goal. As the non-motion use, as in 5, come and go refer to change of state rather than actual motion. In this case, the normal state functions as the deictic center. In other words, the normal state should always be the destination of come and the source of go. The Kanvi and Gobi sequences are semantically divided into two groups, which are the motion group and the aspect group. The motion group has two characteristics. One is the second verb represents a purpose in relation to the first verb, come or go, as in 6. And the other is that an agentive interpretation of come and go is required. As shown in 7a, we can regard the tracks as an agent, so 7a is acceptable. However, as shown in 7b, the subject pieces of driftwood cannot satisfy requirement of agentive interpretation, so 7b is not acceptable. With respect to deictic motion uses, come and go are goal-oriented and source-oriented, respectively. With respect to deictic evaluation uses, the destinations of come and go evoke positive and neural evaluations, respectively. In this regard, the imperatives are closely related to the evaluative uses shown in 8 and 9. The can-be sequence in 8a retains friendly motives as pragmatic purposes or pragmatic effects. However, the go-be sequence in 8b serves contextually neutral practices, and the go-be sequence in 9 retains negative motives as pragmatic purposes or pragmatic effects. This negative motive is closely related to the situation, which means the subject of the verb go is not at the dialectic center as a normal state. Go fly a kite is used to tell someone to go away or stop bothering or interfering with you. However, as neutral practice, it can also be interpreted literally, meaning to go somewhere and fly a kite. Next, I'll explain the aspect group. The aspect group has two characteristics. One is that only the go-be sequence occurs in this group, as shown in 10. In this group, the motion meaning of go is attenuated. That is, the first verb go retains no sense of movement. Go means to start to act as to the second verb. In this sense, go inherits the future of the motion use, and go retains the source-oriented interpretation. Go functions as inceptive motion. The other is that agentive interpretation of go is required. This slide provides overview of the key points. The can-be and go-be sequences share three common features. First, they consist of the non-past form of can or go, followed by their form of second verb. Second, a dialectic interpretation contributed by can or go is required. Third, an agentive interpretation is required. Even though can and go don't always entail agentive interpretation in other uses, the major difference between them concerns their pragmatic purposes or effects. The can-be sequence conveys friendly or inviting motives, whereas the go-be sequence conveys neutral or sometimes negative motives. This is the last slide. The instruction discussed here are a pilot scheme that can be extended to other grammatical areas. We need to focus on linguistic phenomena that rarely covered in student grammar books or learner dictionaries. The development of such instructions makes a clear and positive contribution to academic practice, particularly to grammatical instruction. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for a well-delivered presentation.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions from our audience? We will be continuing with online presentation 5, assessing the circular alignment between SEFR and Mexico's next national English program, a content analysis. You may proceed.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. I want to thank the organizers of this event because actually this is my first international presentation that I'm making. And well, let's see if it is sharing now. Okay. So, well, thank you, everybody. My name is Iran Mendoza. I'm from Mexico. I am a doctoral student of the Institute of Educational Research of the Universidad Veracruzana. And I also want to thank my research directors, Cesar Antonio Aguilar. And well, as the presenter has already explained, this is going to be just a summary of a part of the research that we are currently conducting at the Institute. And it deals with the alignment that exists between the European Framework of Reference and Mexico's National English Program, which is called PRONI. And you're going to see that this program is mentioned very frequently in the presentation. Now, the importance of English in Mexico, in Mexico's national education system, basically, unlike the common European framework of reference, in Mexico, the language program, the English language program, has mainly the purpose of developing a qualified labor force. So that is basically the main comparison that exists as a difference. And also, there are some studies that have already highlighted the fact that knowing or speaking English in Mexico represents nearly 20% of a greater income in comparison to those people that don't speak the language. Now, something important that created the interest to conduct this research has to do with the positioning that Mexico has in the international ranking area. We can see that worldwide in 2023, according to Education First, we were located on rank 89 in the low proficiency of English. In the year 2025, we went lower in the ranking. So we went from the position 89 to 103 in the very low proficiency. And this evidently creates a series of questions of what is exactly happening in Mexico. So many other educational factors that affect learning have already been studied in relation to the English language, like employability, salary, infrastructure, etc. But something that has not been studied or that had not been studied in depth consisted on understanding what exactly the English program was, what were the foundations of this program. So that's why we have this research question: how and to what extent does the Mexican PRONI align with the European framework? And the research objective is precisely assess the curricular alignment between the Mexican National English Program, the PRONI, and the European framework through a comparative discourse and content analysis. So the specific objectives in the first place, to identify the origins and theoretical foundations of the European framework. Second, identify the origins and theoretical foundations of the PRONI, and finally compare the two of them. Now, something that we understood during this research as part of the divergences or differences that exist. In the pedagogical dimension, the European framework does not explicitly propose any pedagogical principles, but there's a strong influence of Vygotsky and Bandura learning theories and a focus on action and task-based learning. In the case of the PRONI, it's basically focused on the communicative language teaching. So we see the first difference in this case. According to the mother tongue, there's another strong difference. The European framework considers the mother tongue as a language of instruction in the early stages of development, and in the PRONI, the mother language is practically eradicated in order to align with Krashen's language acquisition perspective, which applies mainly for second language scenarios. In the educational area, the European framework mainly promotes linguistic diversity, but this is understood as the different national languages that exist in Europe and in the rest of the world, and it also promotes multiculturalism. In the case of the PRONI, language learning is basically to enhance students' social mobility, professional development, and economical progress. Now, from the curricular perspective, which is the main focus of this research, there's a strong discursive emphasis in the European framework on language, cultural, and social skills that students are expected to develop. And there is a linguistic evidence of theoretical fundaments as epistemological basis on how knowledge is built and how language is understood. In the case of the PRONI, there's no clear discursive evidence of theoretical fundaments or the European framework's principles. And at a content level, theory seems to be operationalized instead of a framework. And finally, and this is a large discussion that is probably one of the main divergences that exist between the two approaches. In the European framework, the target language is understood and taught through a second language approach. In the PRONI, the second language theories are adapted, but there is no clear evidence of a foreign language approach. And we know that the social and linguistic surroundings around the two scenarios are totally different. Now, in the case of the PRONI so far, what has been researched has to do with the pedagogical approach, the employment of the communicative language approach, but depending questions, what's the pertinence of this teaching approach in the Mexican context for national public education? In the case of the curriculum, it was designed based on the European framework. This has been studied, but what has not been studied or what have not been studied is what underlying pedagogical, didactic, and linguistic theoretical fundamentals were employed as a basis in the PRONI design. And finally, the impact on curriculum. What has been studied is the curricular transformation that the PRONI suggests that the teachers have a need for new skills. But what has not been studied is what are such skills and what transformations did the PRONI provoke in teachers training and university education. So for the theoretical framework of analysis, there were basically 3 points of view. The 2002 version of the European framework in Spanish, which contains basically communicative language activities and strategies and communicative language competences. There is another version from 2020 that contains also plurilingual and pluricultural competence and sign language competence. But these two were not at the basis of the creation of the PRONI. That's why these two areas were omitted. And then from the learning theories and language teaching approaches, we have basically two authors from the learning theories perspective and two didactic approaches, and also the linguistic theories. So for the European framework, basically the two categories, communicative language activities and strategies, and communicative language competences. So all these concepts that I am presenting right now, they were analyzed in the two documents, the European Framework of Reference and the National English Program in Mexico, from two levels, from the discourse analysis, so basically looking for literally these expressions in the program, in the documents, and the content analysis. In this part, it was more an hermeneutic approach, looking for some suggestive evidence of these implications in the development of the program. So basically, it's like looking for expressions, ideas, paragraphs, or full sentences that suggest that, for example, listening comprehension was taken into account. Okay, so in this case, for example, if the document said students are going to listen to a recording explaining a forecast for the weather for the following weekend, okay, it doesn't say listening comprehension, but the full description can be classified within listening comprehension. So that's how the content analysis was performed. From the learning theories and didactics, so basically it was Vygotsky and the social-cultural learning, Bandura and the social cognitive theory, from the didactics approach, the communicative competence and task-oriented learning, with all the subcategories that we can observe here on screen. And from the theoretical linguistic foundations, instead of analyzing from the point of view of authors, the analysis was performed taking into consideration mainly some general aspects of language. So language as a social interaction, the contextualized communicative competence, and functional language use, with all the subcategories that we can observe. So after this, we performed the analysis. And in this case, we are going to present, or I'm going to present, sorry, the discourse analysis results and then the content analysis results. Now, here we can see the frequency of key concepts in the PRONI, and I hope the colors are very clear. We can observe in red the curricular contents, in green the general contents of the Mexican PRONI, and the total frequency in yellow. So something that catches one's attention from the discourse point of view is that in the curricular contents, we have only comprehension strategies that appear. So this explains that, at least in the discourse, the main concepts of the European framework do not appear for the teacher. And something important to understand in this analysis, the general contents is part of the PRONI that explains the program. And the curricular contents contains all the learning objectives and a part of the description of the activities in class. So this is important because we can observe that in this case, in the curricular contents, at least in the discourse, these terms from the European framework do not appear except for comprehension strategies. And then when we observe the total frequency, we can observe that, for example, listening comprehension appears a total of 66 times. In the European framework, 63, and in the PRONI, only 3. So this explains in a very clear manner that at a discourse level, we can say a discursive erosion of the European framework in the PRONI. So it is said that the PRONI is taking into consideration the European framework, but at least in the discourse, we don't really clearly see this aspect. And here we can observe an evolution of the European framework in the different Mexican programs. And we can see that from 2010 in the PRONI, which is actually represented by these long blue bars, and to the current program from 2022, the study plan of the new Mexican school, we can observe that actually the European framework principles continue to disappear, and this is progressive. Now, from the content analysis, we can observe, just as a brief summary, you can observe that in this part, what it says, the curricular content, we have a larger number of mentions of all the European framework principles. So this starts explaining that at a content level, there is an operationalization of the principles of the European framework. So, and we can affirm this because in the curricular contents, which explains all the activities in class, we have a larger number of mentions of all these aspects. And the same happens with learning and didactics. From the discourse analysis, we can observe that in the discourse, all the theories and didactic approaches are practically disappearing. In the PRONI, in the general context and the curricular contents. When we observe the content analysis, this is an example that illustrates more clearly what exactly happened in this program. We can observe that actually we have a larger appearance of the principles of, for example, in this case, the task-based learning in the curricular content, which is the explanation of what students have to do in class. But in the general content, which is actually the epistemological basis of the English program, the number of mentions is lower. In this case, we can see a summary, and we can see that the curricular contents contained a larger number of mentions. So this reinforces the idea and the analysis that, or the conclusion that the epistemology in the PRONI is operationalized and is not the basis to understand the program. From the linguistic theories, it's exactly the same story. In the discourse analysis, we can observe that the PRONI has a considerable lower number of mentions in the general context and the curricular contents. And then from the content analysis, we observe that we have better numbers, but still the larger number of mentions occur in the curricular contents and not in the general contents, which are supposed to be the epistemological or theoretical basis of the program. So what we can conclude from these findings that we have a discursive erosion. There's a scarcity of linguistic signifiers that orient the way learning and language are understood in Mexico's PRONI. In the European framework, theory's foundation in the PRONI is action. In the European framework, learning focuses on the student and the process. In the PRONI, there's a predilection for the product. The PRONI operationalizes theoretical foundations. It does not describe processes or didactic sequence, and it does not contemplate either a clear evaluation criteria, and the content is sometimes abstract, and the didactic bibliography is not unified or standardized. And finally, the remaining question to be answered: can the discursive and epistemological difference between both programs be considered a factor that impacts the educational act and learning? That we don't know. But what we have is evidence, and we can observe one specific aspect. The Key Learnings program from 2016-2017 that we can observe in here, the objective is to define the most relevant knowledge for the life of students. And then when we observe the international results of Mexico in English, we can observe that in 2017 specifically, it is one of the years in which we are better evaluated and we have a better position. So basically, this is actually a part of the progress that we have so far. There are still some questions to analyze and to study more in depth. But in general, this is the perspective that we have found so far. Okay, and as a conclusion, well, we can understand that apparently there is a type of impact in the discourse and how the language is understood and how the teaching is understood also in the Mexican program. This is part of the references that were employed for this presentation, and I want to thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much for a well-presented presentation and insightful. I would like to ask, do we have any questions for our presenter? Yes, Nayat, you may. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Najat. But
Najat.
it's, yes.
Okay.
Hi. Congratulations for your presentation. It was very interesting. Can you do you have an idea why the Prony lost all of this alignment with the CSR over the years?
Well, like clear evidence, no, we don't have. The first assumption is that in general, and well, this is in Mexico, we have a saying, this is a loud secret. And that's the way we say it. And something that happens is that normally when these type of programs are developed, there is an objective from the government, and then they name a commission, and these researchers start doing the programs. But once the program is ready, normally this requires investment, and this requires resources and political will, let's say. And at a moment, this creates tension between the government's project itself and educators. And at a moment, they probably consider that, well, this is too much, so let's reduce it a little bit. And it is conditioned or limited, let's say. So that is the first thing, because that is something that has been analyzed over and over again, that one of the potential causes of these low results in Mexico have to do with political will because of the investment that it requires. And the second thing is that now with the government that we have, they are not explicitly rejecting European theory, but they are promoting and reinforcing Southern American theory. And at present, there is even this movement that is called the New Mexican School, and they have one cornerstone, let's say, theory that they are promoting is the epistemology of the South. So basically, they are trying to focus absolutely all education in Freire's theories. And this is like not clearly understood what exactly they want. And something that is alarming educators in general is the fact that evaluations have been totally discarded from basic education. So we no longer have evaluations in the educational system. And probably that is just a logical consequence of this discursive erosion, because in the end, the Prony was presented as an educational innovation based on the European framework. There were people from Cambridge that even participated in the design of this program. But in the end, it's apparently like it was the political agenda, let's say, but probably without the real importance that this requires. So that would be like the initial conclusion.
Okay, I have a follow-up question. Do you believe that the European model is necessarily adapted to the Mexican program or Mexican needs? I know for a fact, or maybe I'm wrong, that the goal of the CSCR was to kind of unify language learning throughout all European languages because of that diversity. Do you think that applying that model to the needs of Mexican English language learners is necessarily a good idea?
Well, I think that this is maybe one of the main discussions that exist in the academy. Is the European framework a teaching manual, or is just a description of the different stages of development that a student must have? And I think that is more related to the second idea. So the European framework, whether we like it or not, it is governing, let's say, even the way international evaluations are designed. So taking that into consideration, it doesn't really matter how, where, or when the student learns. There is a specific goal that the student has to reach, and that has to be demonstrated through international certifications. Now, very specifically, whether or not the European framework has been duly adapted to the Mexican scenario, at this point, I consider that it has been partially adapted because there is one significant evidence and difference that exists right now. Plurilingual diversity in the European framework takes into consideration of languages. In Mexico, plurilingual diversity or multilingual diversity is taking into consideration national Mexican languages like Nahuatl and Maya or something like that. But these languages, the particularity that they bring into the classroom, the cultural importance and difference that they have into the English classroom is never mentioned. So in my opinion, I think the European framework is being taken as a reference, but the way it is adapted in the way the European framework proposes is being neglected in the Mexican programs. Because the European framework is very clear. The student's mother language has to be taken into consideration, at least for the early stages of education or learning. And in Mexico, that is not even part of the academic discussion, not even among researchers. And something that I observe is that academics or faculty members that are studying multiculturalism, they include the discussion. They include the discussion of multiple cultures, multiple language, what that brings into the classroom, but this has not been linked to foreign language teaching. So I see a gap of collaboration between these two areas of research, let's say, and maybe that's the part that we have to consolidate.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. We went a bit over time there. So I'm just going to go straight and ask our next presenter, which is Najat, to present for us. I did assign co-host rights for you, so you may present.
Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. Okay. All right. So my presentation is going to be on translanguaging with artificial intelligence in the multilingual classroom. This is a research that I'm conducting as part of my research component at University at Buffalo in Western New York. So a little bit about the context. Adult ESL education in the United States is very particular because of the diversity in the students. It serves immigrant and refugee populations, and students come from all around the world, and they have a variety of languages, educational backgrounds. Some barely went to school, others have PhD degrees. They have different cultural backgrounds as well. And usually the teacher only speaks English, while most students are bilingual or multilingual. So imagine one monolingual teacher 10 multilingual students and 15 or 20 languages in the same classroom. Now, a little bit about translanguaging. It is the dynamic use of multilingual speakers' full linguistic repertoires for meaning making. This means that we are going to dig into the first language or the first languages to make meaning to support the second language learning. And we use all of the resources to understand, communicate, and learn the language. Now, the problem is that translanguaging in adult ESL is a little bit problematic because of the linguistic diversity. What the research shows us is that it is actually very supportive for their learning across languages and identities. But because of the English-only ideologies, the application of translanguaging in such a multilingual classroom is difficult. When a teacher is bilingual English-Spanish and teaches Spanish speakers, it's very easy to use translanguaging methods. But when you have such a diversity of languages, you cannot reach every student in their own language. So translanguaging with AI is emerging, and it has already shown that students can decode text, can learn new vocabulary, and build self-confidence with these tools. And also mobilize multiple languages at a time. So because there's emerging and still limited research, my goal was to see how these students naturally use translanguaging tools and what worked and what did not work. So in order to determine how translanguaging with AI works in the classroom, the idea is to ask 3 questions. How do adult ESL learners use AI tools during classroom tasks? Second question is, what functions do these AI tools serve in multilingual classrooms? And then, under what conditions does AI use, support, or limit classroom tasks? Basically, what works and what doesn't work. So data was collected.
I'm so sorry. I'm still on the title page. Is that?
Oh, you haven't seen all the slides that I've been sharing with you?
Okay, yes, this is why I interrupted you. I'm so sorry. But you're
Oh,
saying
thank
such
you for
interesting
letting me
things.
know. Oh, I thought I was. Is it the case for everybody? Hello?
Yes, yes, actually,
Oh,
it's not moving.
Yes,
oh, I
we only see the
oh, I
same.
am so sorry. Okay. Well, you missed
Oh,
all
yes.
the nice slides.
Yeah,
Thank you for
that's
letting me
right.
know. Okay, so let me just go again quickly around the research questions. Thank you for letting me know. Let me just go full screen. Is it good now? Do you see the questions? Yes. So 3 questions. How do adult ESL learners use AI tools during classroom tasks? What functions do AI tools serve in multilingual classrooms? And under what conditions does AI use, support, or limit classroom tasks? Now, I collected data in a adult ESL program offered in Western New York. In that class, there were around 20 students with very unequal attendance because it's not mandatory. So some would come one day, only 1 or 2 were really regular. And these are the languages that the participants spoke. Some had complete beginner levels, while others were high intermediates. So it was pretty challenging to work with all of them, but also interesting research-wise. So first, I observed the class without AI, and then I provided them with iPads that had ChatGPT. Later, I noticed that it wasn't very effective, and students preferred using their personal phones with both Google Translate and ChatGPT. So then we focused more on student phone use. This is a design-based research method. Now, I didn't want my data to be only based on surveys, but to actually see what works in the classroom. So first I took pictures and recorded videos of the students using their phones. And then I took also pictures of the students' artifacts, basically how they applied the AI use to their work in the classroom. Sometimes I would ask them for a recall interview to ask them questions why they specifically used that or that tool. And I also used my classroom observations, some surveys about the students' background, and interviews with teachers as well. This allowed me to gather 45 translanguaging episodes for over 7 classroom lessons, each one lasting 3 hours, and this was over 2 months of data collection. Now, I coded all this data first according to first language, English level, AI tool used, the task context, the input mode, and the device used. Input mode meaning was it written or spoken to the AI. And later, each episode was analyzed through task context and then the translanguaging function, the student strategy, if the prompt was of quality or not, what the AI output was, and finally the outcome. Did it help the student complete the task? Now, some study limitations. It was a pretty small sample size. Only 11 learners agreed to participate in the classroom. Irregular attendance obviously was an issue, but it is characteristic of adult ESL. It was a single classroom context and a pretty short observation period. But the focus here was on classroom interactions, not long-term learning outcomes. Now, what did we discover? First of all, we discovered that students preferred personal over collective device. Giving one iPad to a lot of students created a lot of issues. For example, ChatGPT could not switch from one language to another. Students preferred writing over speaking. Speaking, especially with a strong accent, was very difficult. Here is an example on the left. The student wanted to understand the meaning of the word guess. So it says, the student asked in Turkish, what does guess mean? But AI heard guest and then translated guest, which the student knew. And then the student said again, no, guess. And then AI understood yes. So there was a lot of confusion. Eventually, the student had to type in guess and finally got the correct answer. Now, which tools did they prefer? Google Translate was definitely better than ChatGPT, mainly because it is specifically made for translation, while ChatGPT is more general. And a lot of students used Google Lens to take pictures, mostly beginners, when the teacher wrote something on the board and they needed a full translation. And they use it mainly for vocabulary clarification, for sentence writing, and instruction clarification as well. Now, let's look at the student strategies that were used. Mainly meaning lookup, that was almost half of their use. Vocabulary search for production when they needed to write something and they were looking for a word. L1 draft to translate. Basically, they would write the sentence in their first language and then translate it into English. They also used it for instruction translation, camera translation, especially with beginners, and a little bit with listen and repeat pronunciation. That was helpful when they didn't know how to say a word in English. For example, one of the students needed to put the sentence, the alarm went off, and she didn't know how to say went off. So she used Google Translate, wrote went off in Dari. It translated for her. She knew how to say yesterday I cooked kebab. So she was able to produce this beautiful sentence. Now, let's look at the findings in terms of proficiency. For beginners, they mainly used it for translation, vocabulary translation, sentence translation, and instruction clarification. The challenges faced was that usually the AI output was too complex for them. So they were able to translate it really well, but they didn't understand what they were writing down. So the task was completed, but not really completed, right? Also, they struggled with prompt formulation. They didn't know how to ask AI to translate a certain word. And even when AI gave them an answer, they still went to the teacher to ask to confirm if it was true or not. So they didn't really trust it. Intermediate learners also use it for vocabulary exploration. They had a more diverse use of AI. They would go for a ChatGPT for more complex concepts. And occasionally they would have some task misunderstanding and they still needed clarification on so many tasks. For example, one student asked AI why we say at home instead of home. ChatGPT did not understand the meaning and started to explain what home meant. Home is where we live. And the student was like, no, no, that's not what I want. They again asked a student who was a little bit younger and more tech savvy to prompt it properly. And when they got the answer, the students still went to the teacher and asked, please, why do we do that? And the teacher gave them an answer that confirmed what AI said. Okay, so when didn't AI work well? So there were a couple of challenges, usually with unclear prompts, when the output was too advanced, when there was a misunderstanding of the task, and some technical issues, usually when switching from one language to another. And of course, the AI could not provide corrective feedback to the students, especially when, even when prompted. Now, overall, Google Translate has the highest success rate and is the most versatile tool for vocabulary clarification and sentence writing. ChatGPT was more adapted to more advanced concept explanation and grammar explanation. And it's more suitable for intermediate learners with high AI literacy, while Google Lens was good for a fast outcome, but it has a limited success rate, and very often the output is too complex for beginners. So what we learned here is that AI does actually act as a translanguaging mediator in this classroom, in the multilingual context. Most strategies involved L1 to English translation. But the main predictor of success is AI literacy. If you can prompt and understand prompts properly, then you are more successful. So AI accuracy, AI output was very often too complex for students. And good news, we are not getting replaced by AI. Teachers are still needed because in a third of the cases, human support was still heavily required by students. So what's next? Looking into the long-term effects of AI use in the classroom. Yes, I can use it for one classroom task, but is it supporting me on the long run? This is particularly important for adult learners whose goal is to integrate into American society, work, study, support their students, their kids at school, talk to their doctor, etc. So looking at these real life applications of AI. So this is something that I am definitely going to look for in the following months for my dissertation. And that's it. Any questions?
I see we have a hand. Thank you so much for your presentation.
You're welcome.
A very well presented presentation. Sarah, please.
Yes, this was such an interesting presentation. I loved it. It was so interesting.
you.
I was a teaching assistant for Intro to Linguistics this past year, and I can confirm AI is so bad at linguistics. Every time we got a lot of students using it, and it got them the wrong answer a lot of the time. So it's not just an ESL, it's not great at linguistics, which is crazy. It's interesting to me because it feels like there's like a missing system between Google Translate and ChatGPT that would be perfect. That's like translate this and also tell me what I'm translating. Because I feel like that's like the missing piece of like maybe there's a software that can be invented that does that. And because this also would be like specific for the L1 in question. Whereas like someone might like with versus guest versus yes, you need to understand like why am I getting that wrong? Oh, it's because like this language in English we have a T at the end of word, this kind of thing. Um, and like a description of what I'm, and also like Google Translate is especially hard if there's different scripts involved. Like I was trying to Google Translate some Kazakh and I really struggle reading the Cyrillic alphabet. And so it was like I could understand a way when it was like translating to Roman. So that's just like the effect of orthography versus speaking was also so interesting to me. Anyways, any thoughts on that? Those were just like the thoughts that came to me when you were speaking. It was so interesting.
Well, you're totally right. I know that there are some programs designed for schools to use that schools pay for, and they are made specifically for this purpose to support L2 learning. I haven't used them personally. I'm just using what is available to the general public. But definitely, you need to be human to notice those little nuances of what the student really needs. So for now, AI is not able to do that, obviously. Yeah.
All right. We have another hand, Caesar Antonio. You may.
Yeah, thank you very much for your exposition, Nayat. It's very interesting, and I appreciate especially this possible comparison between the use of AI and the human task and other similar resource. No, I think that it's necessary to evaluate in a precisely way what is the advantage, what is the disadvantage using this resource, and obviously have a better comprehension about the real impact and not to get out to this fashionable way, no, when you use AI for class, idiom clams and so on. But this is curious because, well, I have only question. Do you not consider in your presentation the use of corpus linguistics? So, what is the reason? And
The use of what?
corpus linguistics.
Linguistics, yes.
Yes, corpus linguistics. For example, I think in Sketch Engine or other similar source. And why is the reason for you do not consider this resource for comparing with the other tools that you expose in your presentation?
How would you like me to use corpus linguistics compared to AI? I don't really understand what you mean by that.
Yeah, for example, in the case that you use, for example, Google Translate
Yes.
for preparing a translation task, well, for me, it's clear that you offer to students a set of instructions, possible guide for using this resource for searching words or searching collocation and so on. And when you mentioned the use of ChatGTP, more or less, I consider that if you employ the prompts, you can obtain more or less similar results in comparison with Google Translate. But I think that it's the same way, but with a maybe different results or different interaction with students and computers. The use of corpus linguistics, for example, with the Sketch Engine, if you employ a search of collocations or co-occurrence of words and so on, maybe you can obtain more or less similar results, obviously with a different way for approaching the results that obtain the students. I mean,
I haven't thought about it, but you mentioned the software maybe for corpus linguistics. I couldn't hear the name.
yes, a Sketch Engine, of course.
Can you write it in the chat so I can
Yes, of course. Really.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. Thank you for mentioning that. I haven't thought about it. I was more focused on just using what Sketch Engine. Major AI tools are available, but I'll definitely take a look at it. Thank you.
It's very interesting. I think that you can find more interesting possibilities that consider with your actual research.
Does it also use AI?
Yeah. I use it with my students. Well, we employ it for some tasks oriented to the lexical acquisition. In particularly, when you use a large corpus, you can obtain better results employing in translation task.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
A question. Well, thank you for the presentation. And well, in my personal experience, your presentation was well, it caught my attention because I'm, in addition to being a doctoral student, I'm a certified court translator and interpreter here in Mexico. And specifically speaking of AI as a tool to understanding target language in some cases. That is a tool that in some cases I have employed, not because of the difficulty of finding a linguistic equivalence, but just to economize time at times. And also to make clearer my translation. So, like, very punctually speaking, sometimes in a birth certificate, for example, from the United States, there is a lot of information that is contained in the documents, and some information sometimes has to do with the medical position of the person that is assisting the birth of the minor child. Now, having this in mind, sometimes from state to state or from one country to another one, there are some new medical terms that appear, some others disappear, etc. And sometimes it's very difficult to find bibliography that explains what is exactly the meaning of these acronyms. So that's when I go to AI and I explain the context. But this is exactly what caught my attention, because you were mentioning some of the limitations or difficulties that students were experiencing with AI. And something that I didn't know and that I learned little by little is the fact that formulating the question directly to the AI does not necessarily give the appropriate result because you have to train it. So I don't know if in your approach there is an aspect that takes into consideration as an initial stage of using AI to teach students how to train the AI in order to have the result that they expect. Because I observe that this is capital. If I don't explain the AI, what is the origin of the document? What is the target public for the translation? What is the part of the document that I am translating? And also sometimes giving the AI previous references for translation. And then I submit all that information and I ask for not the translation, the explanation for that. And in some cases, even the direct link to go verify the information that the AI is providing me. So
Absolutely.
I don't know
As I
if
said,
this is part of the training at the very beginning for your students.
well, these were not my students, but yes, my recommendation, as I said, the main indicator of success was proper prompting. So prompt engineering should be the first thing to teach students when using AI, to give them this autonomy. But still, you have to be there to guide them anyway, because if they make a mistake, they're not necessarily aware that there is a mistake.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
As an expert, you can see that there is a mistake, but a student learner doesn't know that there is a mistake made.
Yeah, evidently. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We're going to proceed with online presentation 7, the triple challenge learning mathematics through a second language in Fiji. Evangeline, you may proceed. Thank you.
Nisumbulo Vinaka, and a very good morning to you all from Fiji. I'm Evangeline Narayan, and I'm a PhD candidate in applied linguistics at the University of the South Pacific in Fiji. And my presentation is titled The Triple Challenge, Learning Mathematics Through a Second Language in Fiji. So looking at the context, so Fiji follows what I would best define as a submersion model of education. So learners come to school speaking languages such as Fijian or Fijibat, and however, they from the earliest years, they are expected to learn English as a second language while learning through English. But mathematics also presents an additional layer of challenge, I would say, because mathematics has its own register, it has its own discourse pattern, so it functions as a second language in its own right. So therefore, I would say that learners face a triple challenge, that is learning English, learning through English, and learning mathematical English. The presentation today is going to focus on the research question, to what extent are Fiji's EMI classrooms facilitative to the learning of mathematics in a second language. So looking at the study design, the study was carried out in one primary school in Lambasa, Fiji, and the school was selected for its multilingual learner population, that is, learners spoke either Fijian or Fijibat or both, or other minority languages. The focus of the study is 1 to 4 classes. The participants included 4 teachers and 120 learners across the 4 grade levels. Now looking at the data set, 41 mathematics lessons were video recorded, capturing whole class interactions in natural classroom settings. So I used Choi's 1985 descriptive tool to analyze the interactions. And as you can see, there were 37 categories. Initially, the framework had only 7 categories, but upon doing some trial analyses, I came up with 37 categories to really capture the utterances. So looking at the coding, each of the utterances were coded by identifying firstly the speaker, whether it was the teacher or the pupil, and then looking at the move type, whether it was initiation or response, and then looking at the function across 37 detailed categories. This is an example of how I carried out the coding. So based on the coding, I was able to get a statistical picture on who was talking, how much, and what kind of talk it was. And then I returned to the transcripts to see how the patterns played out. Now looking at the findings and zooming into the input, it can be clearly seen that teacher talk dominated, of course, all year levels. And as you can see, this range from 66% to 76% across the year levels. In year 1 level, teacher talk or teacher initiated talk 75% of the time, and in year 2, 66%, year 3, 69%, and in year 4, 76%. Now looking at the pupil initiated talk, that was quite less in comparison to teacher initiated talk, and as you can see, the highest percentage was recorded in year 4, but it was quite less, only 3%. And if you look at year 1, that was around 0.3% of the overall interaction that this pupil initiated. So what we can see here is that the teachers provided a great deal of linguistic input. Now let's look at the type of input the teachers provided to the students. So looking at all the years, mostly in years 2, 3, and 4, the teacher mostly provided information, mathematical information or content, mathematics content. Apart from that, the teacher directed the students, that is basically provided instructions on what to do. Then elicits were also included, and these were mostly in the form of questions. So in years 2, 3, and 4, the teachers mostly provided mathematical content. But if you look at year 1, the teacher mostly asked questions and gave instructions. This is because the teacher mostly used the I do, we do, and you do pedagogy quite strictly. Therefore, the teacher, asked more questions and gave more instructions. So if we link this to second language acquisition theories, in particular questions 1985, comprehensible input, we can say that the students received a large quantity of input and a variety of input. But if you look at the quality of input, that is yet to be ascertained. So that led me to my next finding, which is modified input. So in second language acquisition and mostly looking at comprehensible input, we know that when the input is not understood or it's not comprehensible, teachers usually modify the input. This is usually in the form of repeating, simplifying, or rephrasing. So looking at the data on modified input, I found that around 2% of the overall interaction was, focusing on modified input. But if you look at year one, that was around 4.7%, slightly higher compared to the other levels. So this tells me that the teachers did not modify the input, meaning that the input might have been understood by the students, the input might have been comprehensible. And another indicator that the input that was provided by the teacher was comprehensible was the fact that teachers also provided a lot of positive evaluation of their responses. So yeah, that's another indication. But when I went back to the transcript, I found that a vast majority of these correct responses were choral responses. They were not individual responses. So when we talk about choral responses, and I've got an example here. You can see the teacher asked a question and the students gave the chorus answer. The teacher accepted the answer, asked the next question. Students gave chorus answers again. And then the teacher moved on to the third question and again got a choral response. So choral responses, if you're looking at second language development, it actually masks the language development that is taking place, and teachers are not able to evaluate whether the students are actually able to produce the language. So this can be regarded as safe talk. So safe talk is an interactional strategy that creates an appearance of successful communication while concealing real gaps in individual comprehension, as we can see. And if we were, just observing the lesson, we would say, language learning is taking place. The teachers are asking the questions, the students are responding. But if you look at this example in terms of language development or mathematical language development, this is well masked, I would say. Now, let me draw your attention to mathematical vocabulary and particularly focusing on when mathematical instruction backfired in the classroom. And so I mentioned earlier on that in year 9, the modification of input was slightly higher compared to the other years. And in one particular area in which the input was, the modification of input was higher was when the teacher carried out warm-up activities or when she did mathematical or focused on mathematical vocabulary. So here the teacher poses the question, which word is the same as collection? So here the teacher expects the students to identify a synonym from the list that she has provided, as you can see. However, the teacher does not get an immediate response. The teacher has to modify her question 7 times, actually. So the teacher repeats the question, rephrases the question, simplifies the question, repeats the question, and then simplifies, and then again rephrases the question, only to get a choral response from the student. So on a surface, this looks like successful responsive teaching, but look at what is being asked. And here we have learners that are second language speakers of English, and they're still learning English, yet they're expected to find a synonym for the word collection from this very dense an academic vocabulary list. So a deeper problem that is being highlighted here is how is vocabulary taught in mathematics lesson. So if vocabulary is taught in an isolated way or separated from the meaningful activity, it becomes linguistically demanding for ESL learners. And instead of using this activity to clarify on the concept, it actually makes things very difficult for ESL learners and thus defeats the purpose of the task. I'm now looking at the interaction pattern. Interaction did occur. There were back and forth, I would say, talk happening in the classroom, but this was quite rigid. So the pattern that was observed was the teacher initiating the interaction, the teacher asking the question, the student responding, and mostly giving short replies, and then the teacher evaluating or accepting or commenting on the response that she got. So I've got an example here where the teacher asks a question, how much? Answer 38, and the teacher accepted the answer. Then it says, are they correct? And then the student said yes. So this pattern is very similar to what was identified by Sinclair and Cloudhart in 1975. This is not something that is found only in classrooms in Fiji, but I would say across the globe, and it has been identified in many studies that focus on EMI. Another thing that I would like to highlight is the kind of questions the teachers asked in this study. These were mostly display questions of factual questions, and that resulted in very short replies, one-word replies, or if the teacher asks yes or no questions, the response would be a yes or no. And so there were very less use of genuine and open questions. And so that resulted in a very rigid use of the initiation, response, and evaluation pattern. Now, looking at finding 6, which is the pushed output, there was clearly an imbalance in every year. So if you look at the total interaction, less than 20% of the total talk was pupil output at every year level. And out of that 20%, less than 2% of pupil output was an expanded explanatory response. This is inconsistent with the Swain's 1985 pushed output, where learners need to be pushed to refine and extend their own languages and not just to reproduce an utterance. Looking at the use of vernacular in the classroom, this was again quite limited. And if you look at the statistics, it clearly shows that vernacular was rarely used. If you look at teacher initiate, in year 1, the teacher did use vernacular to translate some of the instructions that she gave. In year 4, the teacher used vernacular to control the classroom. But if you look at pupil initiate, the pupils or the students did not use vernacular at all. And if you look at teacher respond, it was rarely used as well as by students. So the reason why vernacular is rarely used in classrooms in Fiji is because of the submersion model of education we have in place. So English is the medium of instruction, is the default language. And students and teachers both know that that's the language that needs to be used in the classroom. Vernacular is used sort of as an emergency translation tool when instruction in language is not going so well, then they resort to the use of vernacular. And I believe that vernacular could be used as a tool for learning mathematics rather than just, like I mentioned, an emergency translation tool. So in conclusion, across 41 lessons and 4 year levels, the interaction pattern in these classrooms was teacher dominant. structured around brief initiation, response, and evaluation exchanges. It was reliant on choral responses in place of individual extended learner talk. So one key takeaway from this study is that to genuinely support the acquisition of mathematical language for second language learners, teachers need to redesign lessons to create real opportunities for dialogic interaction. So this needs to be a structural feature of how these classrooms talk about mathematics and not as an occasional addition. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Much appreciated. Do we have any questions for our presenter? Okay, Sarah.
That was really interesting. And I've done some work on early math education, but here in the US. And it's just super interesting what they know and what they don't know. It's so interesting that the choral response is like, it seems like common sense that that's not great because it's like everyone's like, oh, what's the answer? Oh, this one person knows the answer. Oh, of course, it's this, right? Like, so that makes sense to me. And like how to solve that, you said like we should put more of a focus on like creating a dialogue. But the hard part is with that is like the teacher is like the only one that can like initiate that dialogue and also participate in. I wonder if there's any way to have like paired students, like, and then the teacher goes around and like interacts with each pair. Because obviously the problem is like one teacher and a lot of students who need the information at once. And like, how do we create a dialogue between one and like however many students in the classroom that is? So I don't know. That's just like what I was thinking of, like how to jumpstart a dialogue in the students.
So my presentation today focused on one part of my study. So the other part of my study looks into culturally responsive pedagogy. This is where I look into dialogic pedagogy. And what I found was that when teachers refer to students' experiences or their prior knowledge, this actually opens the floor to interactions. And I have come across many recordings when the teacher mentioned anything that was related to students' everyday experiences. The students, without any teacher prompting, participated in the discussion. They actually initiated the talk. So also in group activities, I've also done some recordings of that. And I found that even though teachers would pair up students, mathematical talk did not occur. So that needs to be actually planned, and especially to help ESL learners to talk mathematically. So it's just like any other language. So it needs to be, students needs to be provided with the language to actually use it. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that. We're going to move on to our next presentation, identification of linguistic paradigms in Mexican official Spanish language textbooks. Carlos and Cesar will be presenting for us. I am just going to give you co-host rights so that you'll be able to present your paper. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much for being here. My name is Carlos Aguilar, and I'm working with Dr. PhD Cesar Antonio Aguilar. This is part of my PhD research, which is titled Identification of Linguistic Paradigms in Mexican Official Spanish Language Textbooks. As I am a quite talkative person, I decided to prepare a script so that I could keep within the 15-minute limit. Before I begin, I would like to clarify that the following work is still in progress, as it formed part of my doctoral thesis. I'm currently halfway through my doctorate. I would like to begin this presentation by briefly sharing with the audience some backgrounds on official Spanish language textbooks, their origins, their characteristics, their relevance within the national educational context, as well as the deep-rooted affection that we hold for them. Official Spanish language textbooks first circulated in Mexican classroom in 1960 as part of a national policy. Their origin was controversial since, as a state document, their use was both compulsory and exclusive in all schools nationwide, public and private alike. With the introduction of official Spanish language textbooks, the monopoly that large publishing house had previously held over book sales was abolished. Likewise, Mexican official Spanish language textbooks went on to influence Latin American educational agendas, since it was worth nothing that for many Mexican families, these textbooks were often the only printed materials available in the household. In other words, the textbooks represented a democratization of knowledge, given that they were provided free of charge. Their development brought together specialists and authoritative voices who designed and ranked the content according to educational needs. The disciplinary trends of the time and the circulation of intellectual ideas at international level as presented at conferences and congresses. From 1960 to 2024, 12 generations of official Spanish language textbooks have been produced. So what the paper is about, as I have mentioned, the teaching of Spanish as a first language in Mexico has been centralized through official Spanish language textbooks. For more than 60 years, successive generations have learned Spanish using a variety of methods and materials. As a result, they have developed heterogeneous linguistic skills and competences. The paper aims to identify the linguistic paradigms underlying these free textbooks. In other words, this is a study within the field of linguistic historiography, through which, for the first time, by building a linguistic corpus and applying a mixed methods approach, I identify, for the first time in Mexico, the linguistic paradigms underpinning official Spanish language textbooks. Yeah, I think that Evangeline raised her hand, but I think everything's all right. So as I was saying, the linguistic paradigms underpinning official Spanish language textbooks, their characteristics, the way in which such paradigms are reflected in activities or lessons for pupils, and the manner in which within a given official Spanish language textbooks, or one or more linguistic paradigms converge or interrelate with one another. Some of them became two cultural touchstones, like the 1993 on screen. I present the cover or one of the most beloved of these textbooks. The 1993 reading book, also known as the Little Dog's Book, El Libro del Perrito. In this respect, the research question is how have linguistic paradigms evolved in official Spanish language textbooks? My starting hypothesis is that official Spanish language textbooks have undergone at least 5 intertwined linguistic paradigms since 1960, in line which textbooks responded to national education reforms and incorporate notions drawn from contemporary linguistics of its time. In this regard, my general objective is to analyze the chronic evolution of the linguistic paradigms embodied in official Spanish language textbooks, SLT, for the first, third, and sixth years of primary education in Mexico from 1960 to 2024. The specific objectives are as follows. To identify the linguistic paradigms present in the SLT, to characterize the features of each linguistic paradigm, to analyze their diachronic evolution and interrelationship, and to provide an account of the evolution of linguistic paradigms in the teaching of Spanish in Mexico, offering a diachronic perspective that facilitates an understanding of the current context. With regard to the methodology, well, I should note that of the 12 generations available, I have to date worked especially with the official Spanish language textbooks from 2024, since these are the ones I have managed to obtain in plain text, TXT format. This is not the case, for instance, with earlier years, which exist only as images or printed copies. meaning that the process of covering them into plain text has been considerably more laborious. I have only just begun this digitization process. Nevertheless, the methodological procedures carried out for each of the 6 2024 official Spanish language textbooks correspond to a total of 373,874 words. However, as indicated in the general objective of the 12 generations of official Spanish language textbooks, I will only be considering the textbooks for the first, third, and sixth years of primary education. The decision to include the first year was made on the grounds that pupils have just completed preschool education, meaning that an examination of the official Spanish language textbooks for this school year can indicate from that very point which skills are intended to be developed and through which methods, approaches, theories, and more broadly, linguistics paradigms. As well, the first year sets the foundations. Pupils or kids are fresh out of preschool, so the basic of the written words are introduced. The third year is the official midpoint. The training wheels are supposed to be off by the third if a child's readings and writings aren't consolidated. Here, the system is fundamentally failing. In other words, the decision to incorporate the third-year textbooks was made because this represents the midpoint of primary education, and moreover, in accordance with official educational plans and programs, it is by this school year that the reading and writing process is expected to have been consolidated. Finally, the decision to select the sixth year of primary education reflects the fact that as students are about to graduate and begin secondary education corresponding to age 12 to 15, they are in a position to make broader use of metalanguage as well as to study more complex Spanish grammatical structure. In a nutshell, sixth grade is where the more complex grammatical structure are truly commented. Currently, I'm analyzing, as previously mentioned, 6 of the brand new 2024 textbooks, a data set of 373,874 words. It is the corpus. So the official Spanish language textbooks is in plain text TXT format corresponding to 2024 were uploaded to the software Sketch Engine in order to identify tokens and types, as well as concurrents, collocates, and collocations, which would subsequently lead to identification of the linguistic paradigms. The software begins hunting for token types and collocation to basically map out the hidden structure. So to break the jargon, what is a token, type, and collocation? A token is just the total count of running words in the text. Every single word counts as a token. A type refers to the distinct unique words used. So the words apple appears 50 times, so it is 50 tokens, but only one type. Collocations are the words that constantly hang out together. Collocations are statistically significant pairing of words. The Sketch Engine allows to take a lemma, a root word, like the word verb, and mathematically prove the context surrounding it. In this image, for example, we can observe the Sketch Engine interface when searching for the word or lemma verbo, verb in English. As a result, we're able to identify which word it relates to and what is said regarding its word class. It is also worth noting that I'm currently working on developing a set of indicators which will serve to guide and classify the content of a given official Spanish language textbooks according to the linguistic paradigm to which it corresponds. On this slide, I'm presenting a proposed set of indicators relating to structuralism. This proposal has been developed on the basis of canonical structuralist texts such as the work of Ferdinand de Saussure. So turning to the results, although the corpus encompasses solely official Spanish language textbooks, I would like to share that in 1972, for example, a teacher's book was published which includes elements drawn entirely from linguistics. As can be seen in the photograph, it includes such topics as the linguistic sign, the arbitrariness of the linguistic signs, morphemes, lexemes, phonemes, among other subjects. This would suggest that the corresponding official Spanish language textbooks likewise place an emphasis on structuralist linguistics. However, as I have mentioned, this stage I have only worked with 2024 official Spanish language textbooks. With regard to these latter textbooks, it can be observed that although the book has incorporated multimodal resources such as QR codes and likewise introduces sociolinguistically oriented content, for example, not standardized forms of the language, its content nevertheless rests firmly on the structuralist paradigm, in which language is regarded as a system. On the screen, 3 images are shown, taken specifically from 6th grade Spanish language textbooks. To arrive at this content, we first made use of Sketch Engine in order to identify the page on which the word class verb in English appeared. We then proceeded to analyze how this word class is presented. In doing so, it can be observed that students are taught through meta-language that function of the verb as distinct from noun and the adjective. The second image shows the conjugation of the verb across the 3 moods of Spanish: indicative, subjunctive, and imperative. The explanation provided states it is used or one uses. However, little is explained regarding its spectral value. That is, what is implied is in spatio-temporal terms by the use of one mood as opposed to another. What nuance it conveys, or what communicative intention underlies the choice of mood or tense over another. Nevertheless, it is also worth noting that within the same lesson, the verb is explained not only from a syntactic standpoint, but also from a morphological and even semantic. For example, levantar la basura, to pick up the rubbish, in which the verb implies the action of lifting an object from the ground, in contrast with a more metaphorical use as found in levantar la voz, to raise one's voice, meaning to intensify one's voice or to speak more loudly. On the basis of our findings so far, it can be preliminarily observed that at the very least at 2024 official Spanish language textbooks display features of the structuralist linguistic paradigm. From one perspective, it might ever appear somewhat anachronic that the structuralist paradigm should still predominate in 21st century official Spanish language textbooks. However, as set out in the hypothesis, different paradigms converge in an interwoven manner across official Spanish language textbooks. The valuable contribution of this study lies in identifying the extent or predominance of a given paradigm within the content and activities of official Spanish language textbooks. In drawing to a close, although this remains a work with preliminary results, identifying and mapping from an educational perspective how linguistic paradigms have evolved in official Spanish language textbooks allows for a fuller understanding of how we have learned Spanish, of the skills and competence that have been developed, and as Austin put it, how to do things with words. Finally, I would like to thank the Universidad Veracruzana, my alma mater, the institution in Mexico where I'm undertaking my doctorate, as well as Dr. Cesar Antonio Aguilar, my PhD advisor, as well as the Secretariat of Science, Humanities, Technology, and Innovation, which has awarded me a monthly grant to pursue my postgraduate studies. So thank you so much. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for your comments and questions as well.
All right. Thank you so much for your presentation. I would like to ask, do we have any questions for our presenter? Okay. Oh, yes, Sarah, you may.
Yeah, that was so interesting. I don't know practically anything about what the Spanish education is like in Mexico, so that was really interesting. Is it like the way you presented it seems like every single school uses the same textbooks? That's okay, that's great, because in the US that doesn't happen, right? Like it will change like within the same town. Like two schools within the same town are going to use different textbooks. So that's like really, that's so interesting to me that it's so unified. And it's because that makes it so interesting to study as well also for your work. But yeah, that's that was my only comment, that that's kind of insane as a concept for me, that it would be like everyone is going to learn the same thing, which makes it really important that that thing is really actually helpful and like updated. So yeah, that was super interesting. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah.
Sorry, I'm muted. Caesar, yes, you may.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to say some words because I am the advisor, PhD advisor by Carlos and Eram. And well, we try in this research to offer historical an historical review about what is the current language policy and obviously educational policy respect to language teaching in Mexico. Because, well, this is interesting regarding the historical evolution of these considerations. Carlos, Iran, and me, we don't have very clear if the Mexican government or other Mexican researchers has documented or has made a possible documentation about what is the evolution of the different perspective, paradigms, considerations, policies, and so on related to language teaching, considering three scenarios, no? The English teaching, Spanish teaching, and maybe it's a possibility, a new way for considering indigenous language teaching. No? So this research, these two researches, very close, very related, and we hope to obtain a possible and clarified scenario on explanation that offer a possible interpretation about what is the conception for the Mexican government about the language teaching and language policies, and what is the results and consequences that apply these considerations in the current state, in the current Mexican educational system. No, that is the main focus of these two research, speakingly broadly. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right, thank you so much. We're going to, Sarah is just going to present her paper because she had a bit of a difficulty there with the time zone. So we would like to give her an opportunity to present. And yes, you may, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It will be very short. Thank you for sticking around for this. I know it's not what we planned, but I can be pretty quick on this. Okay, so continue. So my research is on, I'm a third-year PhD student, or I just finished my third year at Boston University in linguistics. And today I'll be presenting what I worked on as a qualifying paper, so kind of like a pre-dissertation work. And it's called Congruence in Mandarin and Spanish ESL Learners' Knowledge of English Onset Cluster Phonotactics. So my work really revolves around something called sonority, which is basically the loudness of a segment or a sound. And there's a guiding overall principle called the sonority sequencing principle, which prescribes that the ideal syllable is going to have rising sonority in the onset, peak at the vowel, and then falling in the coda. A lot of languages differ on how well they follow this. It's a guideline. It's not a universally followed or universally ignored. That's what's called a guideline. So a couple of examples. But yes, languages differ based on how much they're fulfilling that guideline, which is called the SSP. There's been a lot of conflicting evidence from past research on how this SSP is acquired during first and also second language acquisition. Today I'm going to be focusing on L2 acquisition. And so some research has found that you're actually going to learn the ones that follow this guideline, like onset clusters, so 2 consonants in a row. You're going to learn those before you learn the ones that don't follow the rule. Other research has found that you acquire them at the same time, and still others have found that you acquire the ones that don't follow the rule first. So very conflicting evidence. For this current study, I chose Mandarin and Spanish because they're very different from each other, and then from English. Both are very more restrictive in the phonotactics, meaning what sounds can touch each other. In a language where Mandarin doesn't allow any two consonants to ever be next to each other, Spanish allows onset clusters, but only those that have that sonority rise, so something like fla. And then English has clusters that follow this rule, so we also have fla, but we also have some that don't follow this rule, like sta, like stop or spill, where it's just a sonority plateau between the S and the T. And so the question here is, do Mandarin and Spanish ESL learners acquire the English pattern differently based on the rules of their L1? And then how good is an adult L2 learner of English when instructed to use only their L2 knowledge? And so the main research question is how is an ESL learner influenced by either language specific, so like the phonotactics of the individual language, versus language universal sonority patterns when they're evaluating a nonce word in their L2. Okay, so I had 75 people from the US participate in an online study using Prolific, 27 Mandarin and 34 Spanish ESL learners, and then I also compared them to 14 native English controls. And then they all learned English after puberty and self-reported medium to high proficiency. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a very good measure of proficiency, but they were all very highly proficient second language learners. And the study was translated into Spanish and Mandarin, so everyone took the study in their L1. And let's see. So I created 100 nonce words, all of the form consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant. And then they all started with an onset cluster. I've given that here in table 1, the different clusters I looked at. They either had a sonority rise, so a fricative followed by a liquid, like an R, and then, or a sonority plateau, which like a fricative like S followed by a voiceless stop like P. And then this is like an example trial where you play it. You hear me producing something like scad, and then you rate it on a scale of 1 to 5 of how good of an English word would this be. And it was hypothesized that both of these ESL groups were going to be more sensitive to sonority than the English controls two English has varying, like we have clusters that obey this rule and some that don't. And then it was also hypothesized that the two ESL groups were going to differ from each other based on their native language. So Spanish has a lot of words that have that ST, SP, not at the start of a word, but in the middle of a word. So something like estado or espera. So they should be more forgiving of something like scad or stad, nonce word. Whereas Mandarin, it could have gone either way. From their Mandarin influence, they have no cluster exposure in their L1. So they should either hate all of them or they could revert to judging based on the language universal patterns. Okay, contrary to both those hypotheses, I found that there is actually no difference between their perception of the ESL groups of this English. They were both really, really good at it. So first, if we look at figure 2, the cluster either was in English, so something like ska or spa, or it wasn't English, something like spa, or like, I'm sorry, fda, like FT, which we don't have in English, or SR, sra, to start a word. We don't have that. Everyone across all 3 languages hated the non-English clusters, and they loved the English ones across all 3, and there was not really a big difference. And then based on whether there was a sonority rise or a sonority plateau, there was also a difference across all 3 languages where they loved the clusters that had the sonority rise and didn't like the ones that didn't have the sonority rise. But most importantly, when we break it down to the cluster groups, so we could make 4 cluster groups where a cluster is we have it in English and it has a sonority rise, so fla. We have it in English and it doesn't have a sonority rise, so sta. We don't have it in English, but it has a sonority rise, sra. And we don't have it in English and it doesn't have a sonority rise, fda. So we see here, this is broken down by language. We see here that these first three are pretty much the same. They're all really high. They all got really good rankings of this could be an English word. Even the non-English clusters that have that sonority rise, so thla or stra. This is where it gets really interesting. Everyone hated the non-English clusters that that have that sonority plateau. So everyone hated words that started with da for English. They all thought this is not a possible English word at all. This is really interesting because it shows that, and also you can see the purple line here is the English native controls, whereas the green and the blue are the Spanish and Mandarin ESL learners. You can see that the green and the blue lines are exactly the same, pretty much. Statistically, they're exactly the same. There was no difference. The English controls were just more confident, which makes sense because they're native speakers. They were sure that they liked the ones that they liked and that they hated the ones that they didn't like for English. And we could see that the Spanish, that the ESL learners were following the same pattern as the English controls. They just weren't as confident, but they were still acting very well within their L2 knowledge. So what are the conclusions that we take away from this? So I found that there was no difference between the L1 Mandarin and the L1 Spanish groups and their perceptual judgments, and that it only mattered if it had a sonority rise, if the cluster itself had a sonority rise, if it was not present in English. So basically, the difference between fla and sta, no difference, because they were familiar with both from English. It only mattered that there was a sonority plateau when they were not familiar with the cluster from English. So that tells us that that language universal part is secondary. The most important part was what was in English, right? So first of all was ESL learners were most influenced by language-specific phonotactics of the L2 of English. And then when they had no evidence of that, when they were like, oh, well, I don't know this cluster. I've never seen that in English. Then they were reverting to the language universal patterns. It was also found that they were really good at it, right? They were really good at, the ESL learners were really good at inhibiting their first language, inhibiting their Spanish, inhibiting their Mandarin, and acting only based on their L2 English knowledge. This is really interesting work. Future work should look at, there's a lot of different ways to take this. This is a perception study. I would love to look at production and how production differs between these cluster types, and also how lower proficiency learners would interact, and also other languages are going to change the results, obviously. But yeah, and that's a very short version of a long project. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sarah, for your presentation. A very thoughtful and thorough presentation from your side. I would like to ask, do we have any questions? Because I see there's someone that asked, where can we get or download your poster?
Oh, I can send it to you and maybe you can distribute it.
All right, not a problem. I can do that. I'm just going to get my email address. Do we have any questions in the meantime?
Okay.
All right, it seems like we don't have any questions. All right. It's just the four of us here. Okay, so I would just like to thank everyone for joining us for this online conference. The conference will be continuing tomorrow, so please feel free to join. You can use the same link. And yes, just to support other presenters for anyone that's still listening or that's still in the session. But other than that, thank you very much and have a wonderful day. I know for some it's good night. For me, it's good night because I'm all the way from South Africa. And I know for others it's good day and for others it's good afternoon. So yes, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I'm
All
sorry.
right. No, please. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
The title of this presentation is Artificial Intelligence as a Facilitative Tool in Higher Education, Opportunities, Challenges, and Pedagogical Implications. So when you are ready, you have the floor.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. And my name is Hanan, and thank you for having me today. So as you know, we're living in a moment of artificial intelligence in which it's no longer the future. So it's already in our classrooms, whether we invited it or not. So our students are using it every day. And as an educator, we have the choice. Either we ignore it or we can learn to work with it. So today I want to talk about how AI can be used as a support tool to our teaching and learning of a foreign language. And not to replace the teacher, but to enhance what we already do. So I will share what researchers have found, what the real challenges are, and what we as educators can do. So as you can see here are the language challenge. So we have around 1.5 billion people who are learning wide word, and we have 10,000 here or more of hours we need in order to master a language or at least be fluent in a language. However, we have 70% of the people are dropping. So this can be due to a lot of factors, including the feeling of embarrassing to say a word or to pronounce a word or to talk in the target language. And we have 80% of the teachers report insufficient practice time. So, for example, the teacher cannot focus on one person and proceed with that person. It's kind of challenging. So here, what we have how AI transform language learning. So we have speaking and pronunciation. For example, you can use Elsa. It's an AI app to correct your pronunciation, the way you pronounce the phoneme, etc. And we have conversational practice. We have adaptive progress. So you can use AI to see how well you are. So for example, when you have a conversation in chatbot like ChatGPT, so AI gonna correct you, show you the right way, how to write specific word, etc. And we have gamified learning. There are some games in which you start using it, like guess the word, what is the synonym, this kind of games. And we have listening comprehension. It helps too. And we have the writing feedback. For example, the teachers can give a homework and then you start brainstorming. Then you can ask AI to help you finish that. Now we have an AI-powered speaking practice. So, for example, we have a real-time phoneme analysis. AI listen and identify mispronounced sounds instantly, no waiting for the teacher feedback. And we have infinite judgment-free practice. Students practice speaking without the anxiety of being wrong in front of the peers. For example, you can use Duolingo or Elsa, as I said. And we have accents and intonation coaching. Tools like Elsa Speak provide pitch and rhythm feedback that no human ear tracks reliably. And we have a role play simulation, like a large language model-based chatbot simulates real conversation like ordering food, job interviews, and travel scenarios. So here I have a comparison between traditional classroom and AI-enhanced learning. So it's like previously we have one pace for all students. For example, the teacher prepare one lesson. So, for example, we have a different students with different capabilities, different weakness points, etc. However, with AI, you can adjust difficulty in a real time. So AI can help me to focus on specific weak points and improve it. And we have teacher guesses weak areas, and this is it's sort of challenging to guess each person weak area. So we have here AI, it identifies the gaps with precision. So you know what you should do in the future on and what areas you should focus on. We have a homework is here in traditional classroom, we have a homework is one size fits all. So I have a grammar or a vocabulary, for example, a vocabulary exercise that targets all the students. We have for sure students with a different capabilities, so it's a little bit challenging to target everybody with that exercise. Here with AI, we generate custom exercises instantly. Now we have the feedback take days or weeks. Sometimes it comes with the exams or midterm exams in which you can know your weaknesses. With AI, it's instant and detailed feedback. So you can guess, for example, you made a mistake in grammar, the present or the past tense. So you immediately get the correction. Last, we have a strong student get bored, weak ones lost in most cases. So here with AI, every student challenge at their level. Now we have an instant writing feedback at scale. For example, we have a student essay. So yesterday I goed. So this is grammatical mistake to the store and buyed many informations. The staff were very helpful and gave me a big discount. So here, if you see, we have goed. It's supposed to be went. So go is an irregular verb. You know the rest. And we have bite, which is bought. And informations with S, it's supposed to be information, and it is an uncountable, no plural form. So here, as we can see, based on research, improvement in error with AI feedback, it's around 68%. And students are 3 more writing submitted when AI, it's like multiple 3 more writing submitted when AI reviews first. And we have instant feedback versus 3-day or 5-day teacher turnaround. Here I got some tools that help us or help the student to immerse AI into teaching or learning. So we have vocabulary or grammar, we have Duolingo for schools, and they are getting improved day after day. Yes, so it tracks student progress, assign target units, see class-wide gaps. And then we have writing and conversation like ChatGPT, Claude, and the other tools. Here you can trust the grammar feedback, essay editing, conversation role play, content generation for teachers. And then we have vocabulary. We have a lot of apps for vocabulary. It includes apps with games. So here we have a Quizlet plus AI. AI-generated flashcard set, adaptive space repetition, class analytics. And then we have for pronunciation, we have ELSA Speak. And based on ELSA research, they found out that it's like better than going to a school or a university to study a course. That's what they say. So here, AI speech coach for accent training, assign practice based on weaknesses. So here it's based on what you need to learn. It corrects you and guide you to what you should focus on. Then we have listening and speaking, and it's called Speech Lane. So human reviewed audio feedback at scale, pairs AI speed with expert nuance. And then we have tutoring like Khan Migo. It's Khan Academy. And it's a Socratic AI tutor that guides rather than give answers, builds critical thinking. So instead of giving you the right answer or so, it's challenge you. Then we have 5 strategies to integrate AI in your teaching. So we have AI as a homework partner. So the teacher can assign AI conversation practice outside the class. Students have 10-minute chats with the chatbot, then bring a reflection to the class the next day. That means like as a homework, you assign the student to a chatbot. So you can see the time, how much students spend time on the chat. Then you bring the reflect to the class. So you can have discussion at the class instead of using AI in the classroom. Then we have the secondly, flip the grammar lesson. So the teacher should let AI deliver grammar explanation via video or chatbots, reverse class time for meaning, culture, and the human discussion. So instead of teaching the subject, verb, or the tenses, you can leave it to AI and do more conversation at the classroom. Third, we have drafts. So as a way to brainstorm or to do drafting, students submit writing to AI first. So students have to brainstorm, get ideas, doing the first drafts, and then submit it to AI. Then AI corrects the grammar, teachers focusing on style, arguments, and ideas. So what a human do the best, critical thinking. Then we have data-driven lessons. So teacher can use AI analytics dashboard to identify class-wide weak spots before each lesson. Stop teaching that students already know. So instead of repeating what students know, we can move to something students don't know. And then we have AI debates, opponents. So we can use a large language model to generate counter arguments in target language. So students debate the AI, building both fluency and critical thinking. So student, instead of accepting everything, they can ask back the questions to AI, receive feedback, and get more deeper. Then we have navigating the challenges. So as we know, you cannot trust AI 100% and also students, because some people, especially students, they use AI like 100%. So here, what teachers need to watch for, we have academic integrity. AI can write, but can your students? This is the question. Sometimes you give them a homework, they end up doing everything like in 1 second and send it back to you. So use AI as a drafting partner, not a ghostwriter. Teach process alongside the products. And then we have a human connection. Language is fundamentally social. AI can't replace cultural nuance, empathy, or the bond between teacher and the learner. As we know, we are a sociable creature. And then we have equity and access. Not all students have devices or reliable internet. Blended approaches must count for digital devices. So we need to take into consideration that not all the students have the access to the internet or AI. So we need to do, it's like we need to do both. And then we have critical AI literacy. Here, AI makes mistakes. Students must learn to verify, question, and think critically, and don't outsource judgment. So as we know, it's like AI is at its beginning, and we shouldn't accept everything. We should use our critical mind. So here we have the takeaway. So AI, some people, they say AI will replace everything. It's going to replace human and that and that. So AI will not replace great teachers, but great teachers who use AI will replace those who don't. So we can start with one tool this week, like start with Elsa or any kind of AI tools for learning language, and we can share the results with our team, especially when collaborating with each other. Then we can build AI literacy alongside language skills, and then keep the human heart of your classroom. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. There's interesting concepts and ideas. AI is on everybody's tongues at the moment, and I'm of the same opinion of you that we should be working with it rather than against it.
Yeah, that's right.
Definitely. And I'm going to say thank you for joining language education online. I hope it's been insightful and you've got some ideas and enjoyed discussing with everybody online. Obviously, we'd like to say a big thank you to the keynotes and presenters. Without presenters, we wouldn't be able to hold the conference. I'm sure you're aware that the society is growing. We have lots of innovation going on at the moment. We've just launched our new library. We also have some other things coming, which will be released shortly. And I also just want to mention for you guys, this might be interesting or linked quite closely, that we also have language disorders coming up. We also have a special session with DLAD, who are offering free attendance to everybody. So if you're interested to come and have a look with this, you're more than welcome. So like I say, from ourselves at the Society, so from the committee members, from myself, from Antonis, as I'm sure some people have met them. I can see Caesar, I've met him before here. We went for a meal in Paris, I believe. Hope to see you in person again at some point. So that's it. From us to the Society, a big thank you, and I hope to see you again at an upcoming conference. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity and got success now with the event. And obviously, I hope that you can give the continuity with in other occasion, no? This is a good initiative, I think.
Well, we're growing and growing. Some people,
Yeah.
we just mentioned Duolingo. In fact, we're back in Paris this year, and one of our keynotes is from Duolingo English. It should be a big event. We're back in an ALCO. It's going to be massive. I think this is going to be the launch of the new company, so to speak. So I hope to see you there. I hope to see a submission.
Yeah.
We could go
I hope
back
so.
to the real. Okay,
I
everybody.
hope so.
Hope to see everybody at future conferences, like I said, and see you next time.